If you're someone who believes children deserve justice, who thinks the truth matters more than protecting lies, then you need to subscribe right now. Because if you won't stand up for missing children by hitting that subscribe button, then honestly, what will you stand up for? And if you're not going to subscribe, at least have the courage to tell us why in the comments. There are moments in every investigation when a single witness can change everything. A casual glance, an unexpected encounter, a few words exchanged. These seemingly minor interactions can shatter carefully constructed lies and reveal the truth hiding beneath. In the case of Lily and Jack Sullivan, that moment came at dawn on May 2nd, when a neighbor named Janie stepped outside her house and saw something that didn't belong. Stay with me as we examine this crucial testimony, and don't forget to subscribe, because this witness statement will reveal how close we came to solving this case in the first few hours. Janie lived just 2 doors down from the Sullivan house on Landone Road. She wasn't part of any surveillance operation, wasn't expecting trouble, wasn't even supposed to be awake at 6:30 a.m. on a quiet Tuesday morning. But insomnia had kept her restless, and she decided to step outside for some fresh air. What she saw would haunt her for months afterward. Malia Brooks Murray was standing by the roadside, motionless, staring ahead with an expression Janie would later describe as stunned and vacant. She wasn't pacing. She wasn't searching. She wasn't calling for help. She was simply standing there, clutching her phone, as if waiting for something or someone. The interaction lasted only seconds, but those seconds would become the most analyzed moments in the entire investigation. Janie approached and asked a simple question. "What are you doing?" Malia's response was silence. Not the kind of silence that comes from being lost in thought, but the frozen silence of someone caught in the middle of something they can't explain. She looked at Janie with wide, frightened eyes, then turned and walked away without saying a word. That moment, seemingly innocent, became the foundation for one of the most controversial theories in the case. Because if Malia was standing by the roadside at 6:30 a.m., hours before she would claim her children went missing, what was she waiting for? The answer, according to those who knew the family secrets, was a handoff. Darren Geddes, Malia's second cousin and the case's most vocal whistleblower, believes Janie witnessed the immediate aftermath of the most carefully planned child disappearance in Canadian history. Not a kidnapping, a rescue operation that went tragically wrong. She wasn't supposed to be there, Darren explained in one of his viral videos. Janie just missed the transfer, I think by minutes, maybe seconds. That's why Malia looked so stunned. She'd just sent her kids away with someone she trusted, and then this neighbor shows up asking questions. The theory is both compelling and disturbing. If Darren is right, then Malia had coordinated with unknown accomplices to remove Lily and Jack from the household under cover of darkness. The plan was simple: get the children dressed, take them to the roadside, and transfer them to a vehicle that would spirit them away to safety. But Janie's unexpected appearance disrupted everything. Instead of a smooth handoff and a quick return to the house, Malia found herself frozen in place, unable to explain why she was standing alone by the road at dawn with no children in sight. The roadside itself becomes crucial evidence when viewed through this lens. The location where Malia was seen is isolated enough to avoid casual traffic, but accessible enough for a vehicle to pull over without drawing attention. It's exactly the kind of place someone would choose for a clandestine meeting. The timing is equally significant. 6:30 a.m. is early enough that most neighbors would still be asleep, late enough that there would be sufficient light to see clearly. It's the perfect window for someone who needed to move quickly and quietly. But here's where the theory gets even more disturbing. If the handoff had occurred just minutes before Janie's arrival, then Malia's phone, which she was clutching so tightly, might have contained evidence of the coordination. Text messages, call logs, GPS data that could have led investigators directly to the accomplices. That evidence, if it existed, was never recovered. By the time authorities realized the significance of Malia's roadside appearance, too much time had passed. The digital trail had gone cold. Daniel Martel's account adds another layer of complexity to this timeline. He claimed to have woken up alone and then seen Malia by the roadside. His description matches Janie's perfectly, a woman who appeared stunned and guilty, unable to speak, fumbling with her phone as if it contained secrets too dangerous to share. But Daniel's reaction reveals something equally troubling. Instead of immediately asking where the children were, instead of joining what should have been a frantic search, he focused on Malia's behavior. He watched her. He analyzed her. He concluded she was hiding something. This suggests that even the children's stepfather suspected the roadside encounter was significant. The question is, did he suspect it because he knew what Malia had done, or because he was seeing the aftermath of something he hadn't expected? The forensic timeline becomes crucial here. Cell tower data from that morning shows unusual activity on Malia's phone during the exact window when Janie spotted her. While authorities haven't released the specific details, sources suggest there was a brief spike in data usage, possibly indicating text messages or a phone call. Who was she communicating with at 6:30 a.m.? And why was that communication so urgent that she risked being seen by neighbors? The roadside encounter also explains one of the case's most puzzling elements: why Malia waited until 10 a.m. to call 911. If her children had truly wandered off, if she had woken up to find them missing, any parent would have called for help immediately. But if she had orchestrated their disappearance, if she knew exactly where they were, then the 911 call becomes something else entirely, a performance designed to establish an alibi. The 4-hour gap between Janie's sighting and the emergency call gave Malia time to prepare her story, to rehearse her panic, to create the narrative that would send searchers into the wilderness while the real answers lay elsewhere. But performance anxiety can be devastating. When Malia finally made that 911 call, trained operators noted something unusual about her voice. She sounded distressed, yes, but also uncertain, as if she wasn't sure what she was supposed to say. The roadside witness had seen too much. And in that moment of frozen silence, when Malia couldn't explain what she was doing, the carefully constructed plan began to unravel. Because lies, no matter how well planned, depend on no one asking the right questions at the wrong time. And sometimes, a neighbor's insomnia can destroy months of careful preparation. Janie's testimony would become the cornerstone of the investigation that followed. Not because it proved what happened to Lily and Jack Sullivan, but because it proved that whatever happened, their mother knew about it hours before she claimed to discover they were missing. The roadside held its secrets. But the woman standing there at dawn had seen something that would change everything. And in her silence, in her frozen stare, in her inability to explain what she was doing, the truth began to emerge. Someone had been waiting. Someone had made a pickup. And 2 innocent children had vanished into a plan that was supposed to save them, but might have destroyed them instead. But first, if you believe children's lives matter, if you think the truth deserves to be heard, then prove it.
Subscribe now.
Because every subscriber is a voice demanding justice for Jack and Lily Sullivan. Every missing persons case has that one voice that cuts through the silence, the insider who knows too much to stay quiet, the family member who chooses truth over loyalty, the witness who risks everything to speak for those who can't speak for themselves. In the case of Lily and Jack Sullivan, that voice belonged to Darren Geddes. Keep watching to see how one man's decision to break his silence would expose a conspiracy so shocking it would divide a community and potentially save 2 children's lives. And hit subscribe, because this testimony will challenge everything you thought you knew about this case. Darren Geddes didn't come forward seeking attention or fame. As a second cousin to Malia Brooks Murray and a longtime resident of Pictou County, he had built his reputation on trust and discretion. People confided in him. Families relied on him. When he spoke, the community listened. But by the 7th week of the investigation, Darren could no longer remain silent. The official narrative, that 2 children had wandered into the wilderness and vanished, was not just wrong, it was dangerous. Because while searchers combed through forests and investigators chased false leads, Lily and Jack Sullivan were alive, hidden and running out of time. "I didn't come forward because I wanted attention," Darren said in his first recorded statement, his voice steady but strained. "I came forward because I've seen the damage silence can do. Those kids are alive. They're being looked after. They're probably not in Nova Scotia anymore, but they're with people who care about them." The confidence in his voice was startling. This wasn't speculation or hope. It was stated as fact. And if Darren was wrong, he added, he would expose the source that had given him this information. His theory was as detailed as it was controversial. According to Darren, the children hadn't been kidnapped by strangers or murdered by family members. They had been taken by design, removed from what their rescuers believed was a dangerous situation, and hidden by a network of people who thought they were saving them. The key players in this rescue operation, Darren claimed, were young women, friends of Malia, possibly family members, connected by community ties and shared concern for her welfare. They had watched her struggle with Daniel Martel's alleged control and abuse. They had seen her desperation, her fear, her feeling of being trapped with no way out. She didn't plan this alone, Darren explained. Somebody helped her, and when it went sideways, they didn't know how to undo it. The plan, as Darren described it, was supposed to be temporary. Remove the children from immediate danger, give Malia time to establish independence, then reunite the family under safer circumstances. But what started as a rescue mission had become something much more complex and dangerous. The morning of May 2nd, according to Darren's sources, was when the plan went into motion. The children were dressed early, taken quietly from the house, and brought to the roadside where a trusted accomplice was waiting. The handoff was supposed to be quick and invisible, but Janie's unexpected appearance changed everything. Her presence at the roadside, her questions, her witness to Malia's strange behavior. All of it disrupted the carefully timed operation and left everyone scrambling to maintain their cover. "I'm 80% sure I know who was driving," Darren stated with a kind of certainty that made investigators take notice. "And I'm very close to knowing where they were dropped off." The identity of the driver remained one of Darren's most closely guarded secrets. He hinted at connections to the indigenous community, suggested the person was known to the family, implied that the handoff was just the beginning of a much longer journey. But he refused to name names, yet. His description of the aftermath was equally detailed. The children, he claimed, had been moved multiple times as their protectors realized the scope of the investigation they had triggered. What was supposed to be a simple removal had become a provincial missing persons case with international attention. "They're scared," Darren said, referring to the people he believed were hiding the children. "They're young, they're impressionable, and they made a mistake. Now they're trapped inside it." But Darren's most chilling warning was directed at those same protectors. Time was running out. The investigation was closing in. And if they didn't come forward soon, the consequences would be far worse than anything they had imagined. "You need to understand something," Darren said, his voice taking on an urgent tone that made everyone in the room lean forward. "These aren't bad people. They thought they were doing the right thing. But they're young, they're scared, and they're about to make this so much worse." The weight of his words hung in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. Here was a man who claimed to know not just what happened, but who was responsible, and he was begging them to come forward before it was too late. As investigators processed Darren's shocking testimony, one question burned brighter than all the others. If he was right, if Lily and Jack were alive and hidden somewhere beyond Nova Scotia's borders, then every day that passed brought them closer to a point of no return. But Darren wasn't finished. In a move that would send shockwaves through the investigation, he revealed that he had been in contact with his sources recently. Very recently. And what they had told him would change everything. "They're planning to move them again," he said quietly. "Soon." The room fell silent. 7 weeks into the investigation, with thousands of man-hours spent searching for us and following false leads, the possibility that the children were about to be moved even further from reach created a new level of urgency that no one had anticipated. And then Darren dropped the bombshell that would split the case wide open. "I'm going to give you a name," he said, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was about to reveal. "Not the driver, not yet, but someone who knows exactly where those children are right now." The name he whispered would trigger a chain reaction that would expose the darkest secrets of a small community and force everyone involved to confront a truth so shocking it would shatter their understanding of everything they thought they knew about the disappearance of Lily and Jack Sullivan. But as that name spread through the investigation team, as phones began ringing and plans were hastily made, No one could have predicted the desperate act that would follow, or the midnight flight that would turn a missing persons case into something far more dangerous. If you're following this case as closely as we are, hit that subscribe button now, because what happens next will challenge everything you thought you knew about loyalty, family, and the lengths people will go to protect the ones they love. But first, if you believe children's lives matter, if you think the truth deserves to be heard, then prove it.
Subscribe now.
Because every subscriber is a voice demanding justice for Jack and Lily Sullivan. The name Darren Geddes, whispered to investigators at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon, would reach Malia Brooks Murray's ears before the sun set. In small communities, secrets travel faster than wildfire, and by nightfall, everyone who mattered knew that the walls were closing in. What happened next would prove that desperation makes people do unthinkable things. At 11:32 p.m., under cover of darkness, Malia Brooks Murray made a decision that would transform her from a grieving mother into a fugitive. With baby Meadow clutched against her chest, she slipped out of the house that had become her prison and into the night that would become her salvation, or her downfall. The plan was simple in its desperation: reach the Shuanakati Reservation before dawn, before the investigators could act on whatever information Darren had given them, before the fragile network that she believed was protecting her children could be exposed and destroyed. But as Malia's footsteps echoed through the empty streets of Pictou County, she had no way of knowing that her midnight flight would trigger a chain of events that would expose the most shocking truth of all: that sometimes the people we trust most are the ones who betray us deepest. The reservation was 43 miles away. On foot, carrying a baby, with every police officer in the province potentially looking for her, it might as well have been on the moon. But Malia had help. The same network that Darren claimed was hiding her children was now working to hide her. A car waited at the edge of town. No license plate, windows tinted, engine running. The driver's identity would become one of the most closely guarded secrets of the entire investigation, but their presence that night proved that Darren had been right about one thing: this wasn't a one-person operation. As Malia climbed into the passenger seat, baby Meadow stirring in her arms, she whispered words that would later be captured on a surveillance camera's audio. "Are they safe? Are my babies safe?" The driver's response would haunt investigators for months. "They're safer than they've ever been. But we need to move fast." The journey to Shuanakati took 47 minutes. 47 minutes during which Malia would later claim she learned the truth about what had happened to Lily and Jack, a truth so devastating that it would explain every strange behavior, every contradictory statement, every moment of apparent guilt that had fueled suspicions against her for 7 weeks. But when they arrived at the reservation, when Malia stepped out of that car believing she was finally reaching safety, she walked directly into a trap that had been set not by law enforcement, but by someone she had trusted with her life. The Shuanakati Reservation operates under its own jurisdiction, a sovereignty that complicates law enforcement involvement in the best of times. But at 12:47 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, with a missing persons case that had already generated international attention, the arrival of Malia Brooks Murray created a jurisdictional nightmare that would tie investigators' hands for crucial hours. Daniel Martel's reaction to news of Malia's flight would be swift and brutal. By sunrise, he had posted a series of messages on social media that painted her disappearance as an admission of guilt, a desperate attempt to flee justice before the truth about what she had done to their children could be exposed. "She knows what she did," he wrote in a post that would be shared thousands of times. "She knows where they are. And now she's running because she knows we're getting close to the truth." But Daniel's posts revealed something else, information that suggested he knew more about Malia's destination than he should have. Details about her route, her timing, her reasons for fleeing that could only have come from someone close to the investigation. The realization that information was being leaked, that someone was feeding Daniel details about the case, would force investigators to confront an uncomfortable truth. They had a mole in their midst, someone who was playing both sides of a game where the stakes were 2 children's lives. As dawn broke over the Shuanakati Reservation, as Child Protective Services scrambled to regain custody of baby Meadow, as federal authorities tried to navigate the complex web of jurisdictions and sovereignties that Malia's flight had created, One fact became crystal clear. The window for finding Lily and Jack Sullivan was closing fast. But what none of them knew was that the trap wasn't just closing around Maliae, it was closing around everyone involved in what was about to be exposed as the most elaborate deception in the history of missing persons cases. Stay with us, because what happens next will prove that sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who pretend to be protectors. The Shuanakati Reservation at dawn was a place where two worlds collided: the jurisdiction of Canadian law enforcement and the sovereignty of Indigenous territory. For Maliae Brooks Murray, it represented sanctuary. For investigators, it represented a nightmare. Sovereignty isn't just a legal concept. It's a fortress built from centuries of broken promises and hard-won rights. When Maliae crossed that boundary line with baby Meadow in her arms, she entered a space where provincial search warrants held no power, where RCMP authority ended, and where the complex web of treaties and agreements that govern Indigenous Crown relations would either protect her or destroy her. But sovereignty works both ways. Just as Canadian authorities couldn't simply march onto reservation land and arrest Maliae, the reservation's own leadership couldn't ignore the fact that they were now harboring a key figure in a case that had captured international attention. The meeting that took place in the reservation's council chambers at 6:15 a.m. would determine not just Malia's fate, but the future of the entire investigation. Around a table worn smooth by decades of difficult decisions, community leaders faced a choice that would define their relationship with outside authorities for years to come. Elder Joseph Secocas, whose word carried more weight than any written law, looked across the table at Maliae and asked the question that cut to the heart of everything. "Did you hurt those children?" Malia's response, witnessed by 7 people and recorded in council minutes that would later become crucial evidence, was as shocking as it was unexpected. "I saved them. We all saved them. And now they're going to punish us for it." The implications of her words rippled through the room like earthquake tremors. If Maliae was telling the truth, if she and others had indeed saved Lily and Jack from some unnamed threat, then the massive search operation, the international media attention, the destruction of a family and a community, all of it had been based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what had actually happened. If you're feeling angry right now, if you're frustrated by the injustice of it all, then channel that energy into action. Subscribe to this channel right now. Because if you won't even click a button to support the search for truth in cases like this, then what does that say about your commitment to justice? And if you're not going to subscribe, then at least tell us why in the comments. What's stopping you from standing up for Jack and Lily Sullivan?